which means that we're all ready for our next session with Mary Beth Garcia. So following Natalie's session on how to get buy-in and motivate employees to learn, Mary Beth will show you how you can develop a business leader in an ever-changing environment, because talent development is essential in that it raises the bar for the entire workforce. So Mary Beth has worked with a variety of retail and hospitality clients as a strategic partner, delivering partnership, leadership, communications, retail training, consulting, and executive coaching for such diverse companies as Academy Sports and Outdoors, Advanced Auto Parts, and many, many more. I'm sure Mary Beth will share more of her experience in the upcoming presentation called How to Build Resilient Business Leaders to Thrive in an Ever-Changing, Ever-Challenging Environment. Mary Beth, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. And this is great that the physical activity, I know our people probably are fatigued after 2 days of the conference, but it's been a fantastic conference. Had a chance to dial in yesterday and observe and attend a couple of them. And so it is an honor to be presenting with iSpring. I really appreciate the invitation. And I also really appreciate the company I'm with. There's a great list of presenters, including my friend Natalie, who just presented. So you only have 2 more to go for your weekend. You only have 2 more sessions to go. For us, maybe it's happy hour, but let's just try and get that energy back up for a few minutes as we have time. So I want to let you know, yes, I'm Mary Beth Garcia. I'm the CEO and I am the owner of More Retail. And just a little bit about More Retail. There is no Dr. More. It stands for the Management of Human Resources. So we're really focused on the retail and the service side of the business. And we've been doing that for about 40 years. We're also a research-based company. And what that means is that we vet all of our training programs. So we usually do that with our participant group and really work with the training that's going to impact and find out who is it impacting. And let's really make sure that we're realistic in doing that. So we specialize in the skills that drive really the people results, the interpersonal skills that drive results. And we do that through sales, leadership, negotiation skills, coaching, and consulting. So we do believe training is a process, not an event. I know Natalie was reinforcing that in the last session. And we believe that every day is a chance to learn more. So let's learn some more right now. You know, with the title of How to Build Resilient Business Leaders and Thrive in this ever-challenging, ever-changing environment, I really had to look back because this has been, a really tough year, a tough 3 years for quite a few. And so I'd be remiss if I didn't take a step back and say, how did we get here? Where have we been? And it's really been an era of change and disruption in the last 3 years. And when we take back and look at what was the pivotal moment, it was really January through March 2020. And that was the impact that was found all around the world, all communities. And it was truly an earthquake, a physically emotional earthquake for us that rattled our world, our work, our play, our families, our relationships, but most important, our business environment. So I think the award-winning movie, Everything Everywhere All at Once, that came out this year really could be how we title COVID and that year. So when we think about, 3 years ago and where we were, there was a great lockdown, businesses closed, businesses became essential and non-essential quickly overnight. There were businesses that had supply chain issues. That's where the start of it happened, because they needed supplies they never even had. As I said, we work in a sales and service and retail company. And so our grocery and apparel clients did not have sourcing for masks, plexi shields in front of the registers. So everything had to kind of change quickly, especially if you were an essential retailer. The non-essential had a couple weeks to fill that because unfortunately they were closed. So there was a big financial impact on that. But it didn't just change our work life, it changed our home life. Kids were home from school. You all became teachers who have children. And so everyone, really was connecting virtually. And of course, Zoom went crazy, right? Well, it's hard. We kind of think of this era as post-COVID, but really, how is it hard? As of this morning, there's 6,862,686 people worldwide have lost their lives to COVID. And we still have 686,907 that are suffering from COVID worldwide. So we have to really think, are we really in post-COVID, or are we just adapting and learning to really live? So I thought that live, not just live, but to live with the changes and this disruptive environment. So I thought that we would start off really taking a look at what were the changes, because when we go through something like this, the changes are very impactful and they came up very suddenly, as we talked about. But what were some of the changes that really, have been an impact? And so I've asked Chris to put in chat really, what were the positive impacts of COVID, right? What's working well or better since COVID that we really want to address? So let's just really talk about the impact, but let's talk about the good, and really what's working well or better that we probably would not have changed unless this happened. And then we're going to go through the pain points of what's not working. But while I'm waiting for the chat to come through, because I know we've got a little bit of a delay, I thought I'd really talk about some things. Now, the economy, I can't really say has always been a positive. It's been up and down. Certainly, we went through a lot of real estate that had a lot of positive. The stock market plummeted and then it rebounded, maybe not to where we are. Interest rates rose, but there were a lot of other positive changes, like the fact that the businesses and people had more flexibility. We learned that people can work from anywhere, and a lot of companies adapted that positive of working from home or working from anywhere. I think there became more empathy at the workplace for families, and to realize they're struggling. If a child or a dog showed up on a Zoom conference call and you were having a business meeting, no one flinched. It became the new norm because everybody was balancing quite a bit. And so some of those practices are moving forward. And so I'd like to know, Chris, do we have some now that are coming through? Great. Why don't we talk about some of the things that are working well from our participant audience today?
Sure. Would you like me to stop and pause after every option, or would you like to hear all of them as a bunch all together?
Why don't we talk about what's working well, and you can cherry pick the best ones here. We've got if that's okay. Great.
So amongst the best things, they'd say employers are happier to have people who work from home. That was home delivery, better work-life balance, work-life balance was obviously on the negative side. Yeah. I apologize for that.
Oh, it's on the negative. Okay.
Yeah. Amongst the positive were increased in understanding and the use of virtual connections. And Michael says positive was also work-life balance, actually. Interesting. So the company used to earlier never let us work from home, but now it has changed. So those are the things that we see in the chat marked as positive.
Fantastic. And so these are kind of some of the visuals that we had too. Teleconference, telemedical conference, the whole thing of being, I remember joking saying, I think we've learned we can do almost anything on Zoom, and, having doctor's visits become much more convenient that you didn't have to go to. I think we're good. Let's not forget the scanning and barcode in all the restaurants and everything. That became a huge thing that we can look at something and expand that information. And I think families, more family time, I think, was something that we heard. I'm laughing at a couple of things. There's cocktails. You could never get cocktails and carry out and liquor, but you became being able to get anything online. And that's really what else exploded with that too. And education, training became, and that's something that our business in more retail went from being pretty much 100% live delivery, or almost 95% to, almost all virtual delivery. So these are some of the changes. So let's talk about what they said about the pain points, Natalie.
Right. I would say that amongst the pain points, I see learning how to re-engage generally in a post-COVID environment. Amongst the pain points, we also see loss of human interaction face-to-face. Also, I guess, I'm not sure, somebody was mentioning work-life balance, but without any clear identification whether this is positive or negative. I would probably put it on negative, because for many families, it has shifted negatively. But others I see noted that as positive. And I think most of our activity in the chat rolled around some positive stuff. So I guess we've got very few negative points left.
Well, that's great. I know that you had rolled them both out, so that's why I wanted to know. And if anybody has any opportunities for things that you feel like they're just not still right, okay, in our environment, these are some of the pain points. I've got some photos, and obviously burnout is something that was not positive, and that is from frontline workers, obviously staying in the job too long because there was this mass exodus. Remember last year we had the Great Resignation. We're also having industries that are laying off people. So the people that stayed were working a lot more hours and staying longer. We experienced that a brain drain. There were people that left the organization in droves for the Great Resignation or got laid off that had such knowledge about the company that was lost. Yes, Chris?
There is one more point which I really would like you to hear, and I
Yes.
think it's very, very important. Amongst the pain points, Tamar mentions that my child having to start kindergarten during COVID, so it was 100% online, and now years later, he's struggling with going to school every day.
Absolutely. And I think that's going to be a big impact we're going to see in the next few years of children and education, because particularly in socioeconomic, lower economic and cities and area, I think they were affected because, hey, they didn't all have laptops at home. They didn't have the resources. And this, again, happened very quickly. So I think we're going to see an impact in that and some of the pain points. I think that with all the empathy that we had right after COVID, I think I'm also seeing that we're changing a little bit, and it's really back to profit and the bottom line on that. We did survive the supply chain, but I think that we've learned we went from being over on the online, overstocked to understocked, to overstocked again, and now trying to find what is the new normal between where customer patterns are. So I think for particularly, I know in the retail, but businesses that deal with consumer, we're trying to figure out where are they now? How do they like to shop? How do they like to buy? And how do they like to engage on that too? So great insights on that. And so what it does is it takes us all out of our comfort zone. We've been jarred a little bit, and it's been disruptive. And so when we're in our comfort zone, everything seems to be fine. Well, that was a big shake, but this is a very disruptive time. We've had so much going on, and still, I'm only the tip of the iceberg of the changes that we've had globally. And I know we have a lot of global audience here, between what's happening, in East Europe, and all of the things that are going around in the world, social injustices that we have. So all these things are really taking us all out of our comfort zone. And the comfort zone is kind of where we are, where we feel like we're on autopilot, right? We know the routine. And so what happens is things like COVID, things like what's happening in the world events, the layoffs, they take us to the stretch zone. And what the stretch zone is really where we are really just out of that comfort zone a little bit. We're starting to feel a little bit more uncomfortable. And from there, if the stress continues, then it goes into the anxiety zone. And then unfortunately, that's where the burnout is happening, is when it's been going all the way to stress and panic zone. And that's where leaders are really impacted. If they have not had the support from their organization, the training and the development to be able to help them not just deal with what's happening for their direct reports, but to themselves. We have to understand they've been through a lot. They've got to deal with it in order to be better for their direct reports and be better leaders. So what's happened is we left a lot of people in that stress and panic zone, and they're still in the job. Okay, so they're not as effective as possible. What I want to point out is where real learning takes place is not in your comfort zone. It's when we are stretched. So if I had to put this line right between stretch and anxiety, that is really where the most learning takes place. So we have learned a lot in the last 3 years, and will continue in this disruptive environment, which is a good thing, particularly for all the learning providers that we have here. This is the growth and the learning zone. And so what's the impact on that? Well, there's things within your control in the comfort zone. So everything is pretty status quo and feeling very comfortable. But when you start moving out into that comfort zone, then you really start learning a little bit more about things you can influence, not just things you can do, but what can you influence in the organization, because you're up against the wall. You have been stretched a little bit, and you have to come up with solutions faster. And so really being able to see what you can not only do, but what you can influence in the organization. And then the last is really what happens with burnout is really when things are out of control. And that's really where, if you're left there too long, that is an issue. Okay. So I just want to kind of take a temperature check now. And I just wanted to know if we can launch a poll on where are you now on that comfort zone model? Where would you say, are you in the comfort zone, the stretch zone, anxiety zone, or stress and panic zone? Let's just talk about where you think you are right now. And while we're looking at that, something that kind of happened today, and actually this week, I should say, I am from Miami, Florida. I didn't mention that, but that's where more retail is based. And so I am also a big basketball fan, okay, and a Miami Heat fan. And on Wednesday, we moved towards the playoffs, and we moved to the next round of the playoffs for 2023. And Miami was going against the Milwaukee Bucks. And I'm sorry, I know globally, but I do think we play basketball all over the world, and we call it basketball, which is a unique thing globally rather than the football and soccer. And so what happened is by doing that, Milwaukee Bucks are one of the best in the NBA. And Giannis, who is a power forward and league MVP twice for the Milwaukee Bucks, it was a big shocker that Miami was able to take the win in 5 games. And the reason that I bring this up too is to really think about what happened when he didn't succeed, and how did he, get out of his comfort zone and really get into the stress zone when failure happened, when they lost that. He was interviewed after the game, and his question was, do you view this season as a failure? And his response was, it's not failure, it's steps to success. And so when I talk about the comfort zone and getting out of that comfort zone to make sure that we're in the learning zone, I just thought this inspired me today that, in such a great loss, such a disappointment, there are steps to learning. And the whole season was not in vain, right? Everything we do every day in work is not in vain. We make milestones and tiny steps. So if we have a step back, it's okay, because we had 300 steps that were very, very positive. So exactly. Great. Chris, can you tell me what we've got in chat? Where is our audience today?
Right. I'm not sure where all our audience is, but at least the most active part of our audience is, I believe, the part which exactly strives to learn more because they participate and give their feedback to us. Most of this audience that answers the question is in the stretch zone. However, somebody also mentions that there is somewhere in between stretch and anxiety, or even stress and anxiety. And I also like Michael's comment that it was swinging back to comfort zone, especially with the use of technology, which is fun. But at the same time, I also want to say that apart from the answer to the question about different zones, you also have a lot of high fives from your fellow fans.
Fantastic. Well, that's great. Well, let's go on, because leading in an ever-changing, ever-challenging environment is tough. Let's just say that. And we are going through some anxiety. I just want you to know that's normal. Just don't keep on going. Realize that when you're stretched, you're going to learn more. And what it actually does is expand your comfort zone. So we're going to go over some 3 best practices, some are skills and competencies for developing your leaders and for becoming a better leader in disruptive time, in these challenging times. And so the first that I want to talk about is really leading inclusively, and that means leading with flexibility, okay? We need to meet team members where they are. We need to lean in and learn more without making assumptions. And we have to realize that personal styles differ, and it's okay. I always say that, there's national aquariums all over the world, and you spend 40 or 45 in US dollars to go see them. But how many of you would buy that ticket if there were only goldfish in that aquarium? So value diversity, realize that, and realize that diversity, is the number. But really inclusion is a choice. It's a choice you make every day. And leaders to really lean in and not make assumptions that are really natural for us, right? We all talk about natural biases that we have, but try not to, and really clear the filter when you are leading and working with your folks, and really celebrate the diversity and lead inclusively. We all are guilty of making assumptions. So when someone, eats their lunch in the car, or goes and doesn't ever go out to lunch with other folks, and is really kind of what you call the hermit, the quiet person on that too. They may just need to recharge their batteries, folks. And they, if nothing's wrong with what they're doing at work, don't make assumptions on that. really do treat everybody, with respect and honor that we all come from different places. And the other is generational. We have to really think about generational issues and just really making sure that we are the best that we can be for them and really keeping an open mind and open vision of them. And so thinking about that and flexing, it's, when we talk about diversity, I'm not talking about race, I'm not talking about sex and other factors. What I'm talking about is leadership style and where they are in their development. So it's all of that we need to really meet members where they are. So we have a model at More Retail we call the flexing leadership roles. And so the flexing leadership is really about meeting them where they are developmentally. And so the left side axis is all about the needs of your direct reports and your associates. Are they new to the job? Maybe not new to the company, but they're new to the job. They've been transferred into this. They're changing their role, okay? That would be, new and changing. Performing with potential. They've been there a while. They're starting to do well. They understand the performance standards and then how to achieve them. Next, are they innovate and expand? And what that means is they really are ready, really are learning. They have got all the basics down and they're really ready for the next level. They could be getting ready for a promotion, but they're still learning quite a bit. And the last one is creating and explore. And those are those people that are ready for more creative. They may be ready for the next position or to take that. So these are all needs. And I will tell you, it's not a one size fits all. You could have somebody that is new to the position, but they certainly understand 14 aspects of that job very well because they got promoted from within. So you don't need to teach them everything, right? And that's where we really connect. What is the role of the leader, right? What are the leadership roles you need to play to meet the needs of your associates? And so the first is teacher. But if they've been there a while, you don't have to teach them about the company. You don't have to teach a lot about the process of accounting or whatever division that you're in, but you probably do need to teach them about leadership because they just took on additional role or responsibility or a new rollout that we're doing in technology. So always think about that you don't have to stay in that one size fits all. And that's why we call it flexing leadership. So teacher role is about standards, process, and structure, right? And so that's the role you need to play. When they are performing with potential, it's much more about skills, strategies, best practices that you're going to share with them. And there's some risk involved when you're coaching them. They've been in that job before. You may not need to teach most things, but you do need to coach them and reinforce it. We're going to talk in a few minutes about behavior. If we ignore good behavior, we're not going to get a lot more of it, right? It's going to actually go down. So coaching and playing that role of coach with people that have been around a while and performing potential. And then the role of mentor, when you actually have to take a little step back and let them perform. That is for those folks that are ready for that next assignment and starting to be ready and being in that advanced. You might call them high pose in your environment. And that's where you have to be a little bit neutral, right? You don't want to give as much advice. You're not telling a lot. You're really listening to them and then being able to guide them. And the last is champion and advocate. Those are the folks that you are championing and letting know other people in the organization that know them so that you can expand them and let them know. It's kind of internal networking where you want everybody to know they're doing very well and they could take your job and they could take a couple other jobs besides in the organization, that they're ready to move on. So that's really where we have, and I think that we may have had a poll that we're just wondering where you think you or where your staff are right now. And I'm not sure, Chris, if we had that in or if did we? Good. So let's launch that just to see where do you feel, your direct reports, in terms of where are they now, because that's going to impact what role you need to play. So why don't we put that in chat? Thank you. What happens when you're coaching and when you go through mentoring and championing, there's a lot more external resources. It's not just the training programs that are in your company. You're also introducing them to other people that can mentor them. So it's a lot more on the job and experiential learning that they are receiving. Chris, do we have something in the chat so far? Great.
Just the first answers are coming. Unfortunately, it takes a little more time, but
I know.
Circle of Care Learning and Development says that it's innovate and expand. So it's option C.
Yep.
Also, we have some options A and B. So, well, we're basically all over the spectrum. But I guess this is a very powerful self-diagnostics when you can just ask yourself this question and clearly have a better and more comprehensive understanding of those flexing leadership roles.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's exactly it. It's not a one size fits all. And even within one role, you need to flex to another. So as I said, if you've got someone that you just hired and you hired them because they're experienced in your industry and you know they're going to perform, that, you're going to do a lot of teaching because they need to learn about your organization. But they know a lot about, whether it be retail or accounting or whatever the industry that they have. So you don't need to teach them the basics. If you do that, they're going to ask, why did I come here? I came here for a better opportunity. I want to grow. So always remember, you have to flex too. You need to be a teacher and a coach and a mentor and a champion as well. So that's what it is. And that's why we talk about really leading inclusively is really leading to where your people need you the most and really understanding what their needs are to get them to grow. And it's part of their development journey. So we believe in flexible. The second skill and kind of competency that we think it really encompasses a lot, and it has to do with effective leadership communication skills. Leading and communicating in these days, and especially in a virtual environment or a hybrid environment where some of you are back to work 3 days a week, sometimes virtual. There's a whole different changes in our environment. In the retail and services industry, everybody's back to work and live, and it's, you're there where the customers are all the time. Being able to communicate at all levels are extremely important. And so as leaders, the first thing we have to do is build trust and accountability. And this kind of builds on to where we've been and where our associates may be feeling right now. They may, with a lot of the way the changes were, if organizations didn't know at first and didn't really treat us that well because they didn't know how to handle, some of that are pain points that they still hold. And so you've got to build trust. They may not trust you or they may not trust the company. There's a lot of things in leadership we can do to impact trust, to build trust. And communication, open communication is key. And communicating ineffectively is where you can erode trust. And so you may not be conscious of that, what you're doing, to the relationship to damage trust. So start with clear expectations. Be realistic in delegation and the number of priorities you're throwing on them. Make sure it's realistic. Understand their whole world. Be inclusive. Diversity is a fact, as I said, and inclusion is a choice. You choose to really respect them, respect the differences, and that will truly build trust with your associates. And the next is ask versus tell. It's really, you need to ask more questions and open-ended questions. Be curious, don't be judgmental when you're asking questions, and lean in a little bit more. Test for reaction. How are you doing? And how was the new implementation? What are some of the changes that you've been through? We really needed to create dialogue with them. We need to hear their voice more than yours. And that's hard for leaders sometimes, right? You don't always have to be the one with all the answers, as we said, particularly when people are growing in their career and you're coaching and mentoring and championing them. So really press for specifics if they say things are okay. There's a 4-letter word that I always say is a danger zone for leaders. When you ask your associates, how you doing? And they say fine. Fine is a 4-letter word, okay, that you really is not fine. If you think about it, how many people, when you say, I'm fine, just fine, it usually means something more. And that's where you need to lean in and really press for specifics. Tell me more about that. And ask open-ended questions to really get that engagement with them. The third is, if you ask, you should listen, okay? And one of the things that we've learned is listening is not just, listening is not waiting for them to finish so you can add your feedback, okay? Listening is truly listening to what they've said. This is the best way to build trust, is when people feel they have been heard in an organization. And the other is empathy. You need to really be empathetic to what everybody is going through. And that doesn't mean that you need to own it. It doesn't mean that you need to agree with it, but you need to recognize that it's their emotion and their feeling. And whatever they're going through, you've got to show compassion. And that's where it's is really the differences in leaders. And I think that all of you would agree that when you're more compassionate, you're listening and you can engage your direct reports, that's when you do build trust. So all of these work very well together. And then next is shaping performance with reinforcement. And that's a big bunch of words. But what we mean is when you see something good, don't ignore it, right? Encourage it. And really, you should be spending as leaders 75% of your time encouraging good behavior and behavior that is standard. A lot of times leaders, we think, well, that's the standard. That's exactly what I expect. It's nothing special, right? I don't need to reinforce that. No, you need to reinforce it, because what can happen is if they don't recognize what good is, okay, what is standard, and that they're performing up to that, there's a good chance that those performance will slip. And the other is really is redirecting. If they're getting off course, tell them quickly, let them know we'll get back on the course. And certainly if it's a non-negotiable in the organization, something they're going down the total path, you need to correct that and be timely with that so that we can shape performance, the performance that we want. The last thing you want to do is not shape the performances that are the good performances in your organization. If you ignore bad behavior, if you ignore good behavior, your performance will slip. So we don't want that. So I think one of the last things I want to ask you is really which, just finding out a little bit more about that. I'm just trying to think, do I have another one? Yeah. Which effective communication skills do you feel are most important to you as a leader in 2023? What do you think are most important out of these 4? And Chris is going to put that in chat. Good. And these are not all the skills and competencies. I've just really, with the time that we have and everything, I think it's just most important to gear into what is most important. And of course, we are the company that, we train interpersonal skills that drive results. So we have a little history with this, and we do realize that these are probably some of the most important for getting high engagement of teams.
Right. Yes, Mary Beth, you're totally right. I think this is a great question to ask each other now, but I say most of the audience would be torn apart between trust and accountability and listening and empathy. So those are the 2 most popular answers. However, we do have the other answers as well.
Fantastic. Very good. Well, absolutely. And they all do really kind of build trust and accountability is the overarching umbrella. All of these things will help you achieve that. So these are great. All right. As we're moving right along, and thank you, Chris, you've been a great co-host with me and help moderate this. And I really appreciate engaging the staff. So the last one is really celebrating success. And that means the micro wins too. The small ones. And as we learned, from the Milwaukee Bucks and Miami Heat story this week with Giannis, is that, and even in failure, there are steps to success. I think that, success is best when shared, is what Howard Schultz said. And it is something that is not a solo sport. There's some people, just by their style, that like to be quietly reinforced. Most people, just the fact that you need to acknowledge what their success is and to really reinforce that and really share it with your peers as well, I think is extremely important. Don't ignore these behaviors. Don't ignore success, because even when you're so busy, and that's where some of us are, we get so busy that we get done one project, one initiative, and we move to the next one. And what happens is we forget to really give ourselves credit for what we've accomplished. So really take a look at that to make sure that you debrief, build that time in when you have projects ending, debrief, find out what worked well and what do we need to improve on. And as there's always opportunities for us to do better, even when you've achieved a great success. And that's what's most important. And when something didn't work, there's a lot of key learning moments that we think we can carry on to the next project and the next people on that too. So these are some, and when we make mistakes, it's okay. So these are some 3 of, I think, some best practices, competencies, tips, and skills that will really help us lead and not just survive, but thrive in this environment that we were in today. So the business case really is, well, why do we do all these things, right? Why is it? Because it's tough out there. Associates don't trust employees right now. We have a lot of turnover. We have a lot of people that are not wanting to get back into the same industry that they were before. So we really do need to do better. And that's it. I always say in retail, we take we kind of take our score every day. How did you do against last year? How did you do against a goal? We take that score every year with sales and performance. We need to really look at our leadership role and say, how are we doing against last year? How much better am I? How am I growing and developing as a leader to accomplish more with my team, to get more out of my team, but not in a way that drives just profits and the bottom line. It's really about how do I get more out of my team so they're happier, they're highly engaged, and they're going to stay longer. Because when they stay longer, then customers recognize that. They're giving internal and your external customers the service that they deserve. And the customers are going to be more loyal to you. So this is called the service profit chain. And it really does improve that bottom line, because I think one of the factors that somebody may have put in chat that we probably didn't talk a lot about that happened is the bottom line became really important again last year, to the point where we forgot about the people and how much they impact the bottom line. I've seen that in some organizations where we've gone with, there's been layoffs, there's been that right sizing, we call that. And that's happening again. And listen, we have to do it sometimes. That's what we have to do in business to survive. Yet, how are the people feeling and how are your customers feeling about those changes that we have? And so it's a matter of, we need to really treat people well. And if you treat, it starts top down. If you treat your employees well and create an environment where it's trusting, we're building trust, there's accountability, but the accountability is that we can also make mistakes for the right reasons and learn from it. It's called a learning environment versus a proving environment. So our belief, and this, by the way, just for you know, is not a retail model. This was designed over 40 years ago by IBM. Okay. And this is just still realistic today. And that is, it's called the employee service profit chain, because if you treat your employees, that's where you start. You treat your employees first and do them well. They will treat your customers well. It's human nature. They will spend more money. They'll spend more money more often, but most importantly, they're going to tell more people that this is a place to shop. This is a place I want to do business with. And that is where your revenue and your profit will happen. So I want to thank you all and for listening to some of these tips. And I want to also to say that the 3 tips that we have: be flexible and inclusive, communicate effectively, and celebrate all success that we have. So all of these, if we do these consistently, will help us grow our bottom line. We're going to grow our bottom line by engaging our people, and our people will engage your customers to service the best and the highest levels they can be. So Thank you. And Chris, I don't know what other questions we have, but I just want to tell you it's been a pleasure. And I hope that I can answer some questions. And I guess we've got about 5 or 6 minutes, right?
Exactly. We've got 6 minutes left. And I thank you very much for keeping time for the questions. I appreciate all the comments in the chat. I also loved your presentation, just like our participants did. We have lots of insightful comments and lots of comments of gratitude, saying that you were amazing, it was really well done, you've done a good job, etc., etc. However, dear colleagues, dear attendees, I so much appreciated your involvement during the presentation of Mary Beth. So if you have any questions left, please do share. If you don't mind, may I ask you one question, Mary Beth, because this is something that I was really urging to ask you during all the presentation before the questions of the other participants come. So
Absolutely.
The question is, during one of the previous sessions, we've had the concern from the audience that most of the materials that we share here at our iSpring Days 2023 are very applicable to both staff members, team members, and leadership, but are hardly applicable for the top management, for executive leadership. Amongst the top leadership, there is so much resistance to change. There is so much resistance to many new technological and general soft, educational technologies. So can you say that there is something that we need to keep in mind when we're trying to apply those models to the very top level executives?
Absolutely. So we in training classes and leadership all the time, we're training these skills. They feel good. They say, this really does work. I think it's going to work. But is my boss going to go through this training? Is my boss going to be doing these things? We hear that a lot. So I do believe there's a strong impact, the shadow of leadership. And, training will stick. The stickiness of training really happens when you use the new skills and strategies on the job and you get reinforced. Somebody notices it. If it's the boss, it elevates your chance of repeating it very much. So I understand that. I think the big thing is that you can still utilize the skills and the strategies and be the best that you can be and create that culture in your department, your area. And remember when I talked about the comfort zone, what do you have control over and what do you have to influence? This is where you're moving into influence. Being influential in the organization, I think, is good. And I think that's really leading up. But I think that a lot of times in organizations, I think, getting feedback is extremely important, and having that, I think that's one of the things that, I didn't empathize enough, but I think that just having an opportunity to be able to share up and down in the organization. And I think that there's still an opportunity for you to change the environment that you are in and have positive results. And I think those positive results, just keep letting leadership know, but they'll probably notice some things because you're going to get better performance results. And I think that, so don't not change because the boss doesn't or the company doesn't support it. You will be better leader by doing it. And that doesn't mean that your boss isn't. It just means that you can influence them to be able to make those changes.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mary Beth. And while I would like to ask one more question to Mary Beth, I welcome all the participants who are with us and who still want to take the important insights away from our sessions. Please share one line, the most important insight that you're taking away from Mary Beth's session. In one line, just summarize the biggest learning or the biggest takeaway that you want to remember for the rest of your life, for the rest of your activities, for the rest of your professional activities. So please share that with us. And I would like to ask Mary Beth a very similar question. What one line would you like your participants to take away with them today?
That's a really great question on that too. And it's hard to say one line, especially me, right? So, I think that the one line is to be the best that you can be and lead, understanding that your role is to influence others, and just try to think about your mentors, the people that really impacted you. So I would say lead the way you want to be treated and be, and really kind of have that reflection, always to have that mirror. I know that's way more than one line, Chris, but I think just always have that self-reflection and that self-care to understand what your needs are, because that's probably what's going to drive your people as well.
Yeah, self-care leads to the care for the people around you. Indeed. I'd love to just quote some of the takeaways from the colleagues that have been kind enough to share those in the chat. Building leaders who thrive, not just survive. Lead inclusively, lead with flexibility. In failure, there are steps to success, says Tony, and he loved that. Also, even as a parent, I loved the fact that 75% of the time should be in encouragement. Isaac says, lead inclusively and flex to the needs of others. It is my takeaway. So celebrate even the micro wins, says Michael. All right, I think those are really great takeaways, and I love that everybody found something very special and something very different. There were no coinciding lines, which means that your takeaways were very personalized, I would say. So thank you very much, Mary Beth. I hope you stay for the very last session with Anna Polly. I'd like to appreciate your efforts once again. It was a pleasure having you. And would you like to say bye-bye to the audience?
Absolutely. I've just got up here that if you want to get in touch with us, we'd love to engage a little bit more. And this is some of our capabilities and also how you can reach us on here. I just want to thank you, Chris. Really appreciate it. I look forward to the opportunity to work with you again. And it's such a great with the iSpring partners. So thank you so much. And thank you all who attended today.